The water in front of you looks like the end of the road. The army behind you is close enough to hear. I did not lead you into this narrow place to drown you. Not the mountains sealing you in on both sides. Not the chariots gaining ground behind you. Not the sea that looks like a wall with no door. Before this message ends, I am going to open the one road no map ever marked, right where you are standing. You know this feeling, even if you have never stood on an actual shore. It is the feeling of being boxed in. Money running out on one side, a diagnosis you did not ask for on the other, a decision behind you that cannot be undone, and a future in front of you that refuses to resolve no matter how long you stare at it. Someone is closing in. Something is running out. And the only door anyone else can see is the one that swallows. Maybe you have already tried everything reasonable. You have made the calls, tightened the budget, sent the messages, asked the questions. Done what any sensible person would do in your position. This is not a message telling you to stop being sensible. It is a message about the moment after sensible runs out. The moment when you have done what was yours to do. And the water is still there. And the army is still coming. And there is nothing left in your own hands to try. That moment is not a sign you have failed. It is usually the exact moment I have been waiting for. I want to ask you something before this is over. And I want you to actually let it land instead of sliding past it the way you slide past most things that ask too much of you. What if the thing you are staring at right now was never meant to be your ending? What if it is the exact place I chose to show you what my hand can do with water that everyone else has already given up on? Stay with me a little longer. I'm not going to explain this quickly and move on to something easier. I'm going to walk you all the way down to the edge, and I'm going to show you what happened the last time my people thought the sea was the last word. Hold on to this while I do. The water is not against you, it is the road I am making. I know part of you wants me to skip ahead to the solution, to name the number today, or spell out the exact outcome in advance. That is not how this works, and it was never how it worked for anyone who has stood at real water before you. What I am offering right now is not the ending. It is an invitation to watch the ending being made, which is a very different thing than being told the ending in advance. Lift your eyes now, not to the ceiling out of habit, but toward the one window, lamp, or crack in the wall, where light is actually entering the room you are sitting in. Find it. Rest your eyes there for one breath. That small point of light did not have to fight its way in. It simply came, the way I'm already coming toward the place you feel trapped. You have been counting the exits for longer than you have told anyone. The ones you cannot find. The one you are afraid does not exist at all. I see you standing at your own edge of impossible water. The one doing the same math at the kitchen table, over and over, hoping the number changes if you just add it one more time. I have not looked away from that table. There is a version of you that keeps a second, silent ledger. The one where you calculate exactly how far behind you have fallen and exactly how far you would have to run to catch up. The friend who used to check on you calls less than she used to. Your prayers about this have gotten shorter, quieter, more like something you send out of habit than a conversation you expect to continue. None of this is hidden from me. I have watched every version of the count. The parent pacing the hallway outside a door with bad news behind it belongs to this same picture. The one holding a phone that will not stop ringing with people asking for money that is not there belongs here too. So does the man standing in a parking lot after a meeting that ended his plan for the next 10 years, staring at his own reflection in a window and not recognizing the face looking back. So does the mother watching her children asleep in the next room, doing arithmetic she never wanted to learn. How many weeks? How many meals? How many more times she can say everything is fine before it stops being true, even to herself? What all of these have in common is not the specific shape of the trouble. It is the sound the mind makes when it has decided the only safe posture left is constant calculation, as if letting go of the numbers for even a moment would be the exact instant everything falls apart. That sound is exhausting to live inside of, and I have heard every version of it coming from you. I have not once mistaken the exhaustion for weakness. I have only ever seen it for what it is: a person trying to do a job that was never theirs to finish alone. None of you are imagining the army behind you. It is real. The debt is real. The test results are real. The betrayal, the eviction notice, the diagnosis, the silence from someone you trusted. None of that is a story you made up to feel important. I am not telling you the threat is smaller than it looks. I am telling you the sea in front of you is not the only force in this story. I also want to name something you may not have said out loud to anyone, not even to yourself in so many words. Some part of you believes that if you stop watching this situation as closely as you have been, it will get worse, that the vigilance itself is holding some invisible line. I understand why that belief feels true. It has felt true to almost everyone who has ever stood where you are standing. But watching the water rise has never once made it rise slower, and it has never once made it open sooner either. There is a difference between paying attention and trying to control something through sheer intensity of attention, and most of the people exhausted right now are exhausted from the second one, not the first. Here is what the worry has already cost you, whether you have counted it or not. Sleep, most nights. The ability to sit in a room with people you love without half your mind still running the numbers. The version of your own laugh that used to come easily, and now has to be summoned. I have watched you set down joy on purpose, as if carrying it while things are this uncertain would be some kind of betrayal of how serious the situation is. It would not be. You were never required to suffer in proportion to your problem to prove you understood how big it was. None of this makes you weak. I want that said plainly, because somewhere in the middle of carrying all of this, it becomes easy to add a second weight on top of the first. Not just the situation itself, but shame about how hard it has been to carry. You are not failing at faith because your hands are shaking. The camp at the edge of that sea was not made up of people with unusually strong nerves. They were ordinary people, tired from walking, frightened by chariots they could hear before they could see. I did not wait for their fear to disappear before I moved. I moved while it was still there. I have been standing closer than you think this whole time, watching you run those numbers alone when you did not have to. Not observing from a distance the way you watch headlines roll across a screen. Standing in the actual room. That is a different kind of presence than the one most people assume they are getting from me. But that story about carrying this by yourself did not come from me. Somewhere in the middle of doing the math, night after night, it becomes easy to believe the counting itself is what is keeping you afloat. That if you stopped calculating for even an hour, everything would collapse faster. It will not. The numbers were never the thing holding your life together, and they were never supposed to be your job in the first place. Here is where that belief starts to break. Most people carry a picture of me that was handed to them long before they ever chose it. A distant commander standing on a hill somewhere, pointing at a map, telling everyone below to figure the rest out on their own. That picture says love has a ceiling, and once trouble climbs high enough, you are left holding a bill somebody else ran up. On your own, the way people are left holding debts after everyone else has walked away. That picture did not come from me, and it did not come from nowhere either. Somebody handed it to you. A sermon that made my patience sound like a countdown clock. A season where prayers went quiet long enough that silence started to sound like abandonment. A home where love always arrived with a price tag attached. So it made sense to assume mine would too. The picture of me you carry, the far-off commander who points at instructions and steps back, was painted by people who never once stood inside the column of cloud that moved on purpose between a frightened camp and the army hunting them. They never felt what it is to have me place myself in the exact gap between you and what wants to destroy you all night without moving, without blinking. That is not a distant God shouting directions from a hill. That is a God who gets in the way on purpose and stays there until morning. There is another detail from that same story worth knowing, because it explains something about the corners you keep finding yourself standing in. I did not lead that camp toward the sea by accident, and I did not take them the fastest road out of the place they had left either. There was a shorter route, a more direct one, and I deliberately led them the long way around, away from it, because I already knew what would happen if they met a battle too soon after leaving captivity, that they would turn back rather than face it. The mountains on either side of you were not a mistake in the plan. Sometimes the very shape of the trouble around you is the shape I chose on purpose, not to punish you, but because I already know what you are not yet ready to face. And I'm keeping you from a fight you cannot even see. There is also a difference worth naming between faith and calculation, even though they can look similar from a distance. Calculation says, I will trust once I understand exactly how this resolves. Faith says something much smaller and much harder. I will stand still even though I do not yet understand how this resolves. The camp at the sea did not receive an explanation before they were told to stop running. They received an instruction. Understanding, when it came afterward, standing on dry ground, looking back at water walled up on either side of them. Most of what you are waiting to understand will make sense the same way. After, not before. You have also been handed a smaller lie, and it is quieter, so it is harder to notice than the first one. It says that worry is proof of how seriously you take your responsibilities, that the parent who cannot sleep for calculating is simply being a good parent, that anxiety is love wearing its most devoted face. I understand exactly where that lie comes from. It sounds almost righteous. But worry was never the price of love. It was never required of you, not once, not by me. I have never once asked you to prove how much you care by staying up doing math that was always mine to carry. You did not create this fear out of nothing. And I am not asking you to talk yourself out of it, as if it were only a matter of thinking better thoughts. Fear like this usually has a history. Maybe it was a season when the money genuinely did not come, and no one stepped in. And you learned early that you were the only one keeping the whole thing standing. Maybe it was a home where calm was rare enough that you learned to read a room for danger before you learned to read anything else. I am not asking you to erase that history. I am asking you to let me stand inside it with you instead of watching you carry it alone. Let your shoulders come down, just a fraction, from wherever they have been sitting since you started reading this. Notice your jaw as you do it. If it has been locked tight without your permission, let it drop open half an inch. You do not need that much tension to survive one more day, and you never did. There is something else worth saying plainly, because I do not want you walking away from this with the wrong idea about why the mountains are on both sides of you in the first place. I did not build those mountains by accident, and I did not forget to leave you a door. Some of the tightest places you have ever stood in were not proof that I had abandoned the plan. They were the exact conditions under which the plan becomes visible. A road that appears where a road already existed does not prove much about who made it. A road that appears where there was never a road at all, that is a different kind of evidence. the kind that changes what a person believes for the rest of their life. There is something I have been waiting to tell you. The way you would tell someone a story you actually lived through, not a lesson you read somewhere once. I want to take you back to a night that has nothing to do with your bank account or your test results on the surface, and everything to do with the exact shape of what you are living right now underneath. A whole camp of people stood at the edge of water they could not cross, with an army closing the only road behind them, boxed in by mountains on both sides, exactly the way you feel boxed in right now. They had just walked out of the worst chapter of their lives, and it looked for one long night like the story was about to end the same way it had begun. Trapped, afraid, and out of options. Some of them turned on the man leading them and said it would have been better to stay in slavery than to die free at the edge of the sea. Panic does that. It rewrites the whole story around whatever it happens to be staring at, and it is very convincing while it does it. None of those people had ever seen a sea open before. There was no story from an older generation they could point to and say, "This happened once, so it can happen again." They were the first. Whatever you are facing right now may feel the same way, like nobody you know has actually walked through this particular water and come out the other side able to tell you exactly how it goes. That is not evidence you are alone in something unprecedented. It is often exactly the setting where I do the thing that becomes the story someone else needs later. I did not answer their panic with a lecture about faith. I answered it with instructions so simple, a child could have followed them. And I want to read you the exact sentence I gave that frightened camp that night. Because underneath everything else, this message is trying to say, I am giving it to you too. This is what I said. Exodus chapter 14, verse 13. Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. Read that slowly. Take it apart clause by clause because every word in it is carrying weight. Fear not. Not because the army was smaller than it looked, and not because the water had already opened by the time I said it. Neither of those things had happened yet. I told them not to fear before there was any visible reason not to. Stand firm, not run faster, not fight harder, not solve it yourself before I could get there, not spend the night doing the math one more time, hoping a different answer would appear. Stand firm. In the one moment when standing still felt like the single most dangerous thing a person could do with an army closing in. And see, because what was coming was not something they were going to accomplish with their own hands. It was something they were going to watch. The salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. Not the salvation you engineer through worry. Not the outcome you finally earn by calculating hard enough, long enough, carefully enough. A salvation I work, while you stand there with your hands empty, watching water do something water had never done before and has rarely done since. Today is worth sitting with for a moment, because fear rarely stays inside today. It reaches backward into every other time you were let down, and it reaches forward into a future it has already decided is going to disappoint you too. I did not tell that camp to trust me about the harvest next year, or about how the rest of their lives would unfold. I told them to stand still and watch what I would do that day with that sea in front of that army. That is usually as far as faith needs to see. Not the whole story. The next few hours. That same night, I stretched a strong wind across those waters until the sea itself became dry ground under their feet, until there stood a wall of water on the right hand and a wall of water on the left, and a road ran straight through the middle of the very thing that was going to kill them an hour earlier. I did not remove the sea from the story. I did not calm it down into something gentle and small and manageable. I made the sea itself carry them through to the other side. The thing they were most afraid of became the road they walked on with dry sandals. Look again at the question I asked you at the start of this message. What if the thing you are staring at was never meant to be your ending? Here is the answer I have been walking you toward this whole time. It was never your ending, because it was never only water to me. It was raw material. The very thing that looked like the wall closing you in was the exact thing I intended to turn into your road. And I did not need it to shrink first, or calm down first, or become less frightening first. I needed you to stand still long enough to watch me work with it. Let me be plain about what I'm promising and what I'm not, because I have watched people twist this story into something it never was. I am not telling you that your specific outcome, the exact figure in the account, the healing arriving on the timeline you have already pictured in your mind, the relationship restored precisely the way you have rehearsed it, is guaranteed to happen by any date you have set for it. That was never the promise. The water did not part on a schedule the people could have predicted or planned around either. What I am promising is myself, going ahead of you into the very thing that looks impossible from where you are standing, and a way through it that did not exist an hour ago. The deliverance I am talking about is not a transaction you unlock by believing hard enough. It is me, present, in the middle of your worst hour, making a road where a road cannot exist by any ordinary means. The same hand that split that sea would, many generations later, walk on top of another one in the middle of a storm that had grown men certain they were about to drown, and speak 3 words that made the wind lie down, like an animal that had finally been fed. That same voice would later walk out of a tomb sealed with a stone that no group of soldiers could have moved on their own. Water was never the one thing in all of creation that could hold me back. Death was not either. So when I tell you the sea in front of you is not the final word on your story, I am not saying it as someone who only read about crossing impossible water once, a long time ago, in a book. I am saying it as the one who has done it more than once, and who is doing it again, in your life, right now, while you listen to these words form. One more piece is worth knowing before we get to what you do with this. The people who crossed that sea were not the only ones who needed to see it happen. Their children grew up telling the story to children of their own, long after the water had gone back to being ordinary water again. What you do, standing at the edge of water that looks impossible, rarely stays contained to only you. Someone nearby is watching how you carry this, even if they never say so, even if you never intended to be watched at all. You are not only crossing for yourself. If you are standing at your own edge of impossible water this very moment, say so with one word, right where you are, through. Not because I need you to prove anything to me, because naming the thing out loud is often the first small act of standing still instead of running. So here is something small you can carry into the rest of your week. Something that costs you nothing and asks very little of you. The next time the panic starts counting the days left, counting the money missing, counting the people who left, counting every reason this cannot possibly work out, stop the count on purpose. Say 2 words out loud, even quietly, even just moving your lips. Stand still. That is the whole practice. Not a formula that guarantees an outcome, not a spell. Just a pause where you hand the counting back to me instead of carrying it alone for 1 more hour. You may not feel any different the first time you do this. You may not feel different the 10th time either. And that is not a sign it is failing you. Something is happening underneath what you can feel. The way water was already moving before anyone in that camp could see the ground go dry. But somewhere around the 30th time, You will notice the count has gotten quieter without you deciding to make it quieter. You will notice you went a whole afternoon without running the numbers. That is not nothing. That is the sea starting to open 1 degree at a time, long before you can see dry ground. There is one more thing worth carrying alongside the practice. When the count starts again, and it will, because old habits do not disappear the first week you try to set them down, do not treat that as proof the practice failed. Treat it the way you would treat noticing you had drifted off during a long walk. You simply turn back toward the road. Stand still. Say it again. The sea is not waiting for you to do this perfectly before it moves. If you can, say the same 2 words to one other person over the coming days. Not the whole situation, just the 2 words. Stand still. Let someone else stand at the edge of the water with you, instead of leaving me as the only one who knows how afraid you have been. No one crossed that sea alone, even though every single one of them was afraid alone at some point during the night. Fear counts the chariots. Faith stands still long enough to see the sea move. You do not have to choose which one you feel first thing in the morning, and you do not have to win that choice permanently in a single afternoon. You only have to choose which one you keep listening to once you notice it there. You did not imagine what was pressing in behind you. I never said you did. You did not imagine how narrow the path looks. I never said it was wide. What you have not yet seen is what I do with water when a person is finally willing to stand still and watch. The water is not against you. It is the road I am making. Amen. Before you go, I left something short in the pinned comment, written for the next time the water in your life looks wider than you can cross. It was made for exactly that moment. Take it with you into the week ahead. And if someone came to mind while you listened, someone facing their own wall of impossible water, send this their way.